Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the movie The Flash. This movie's been in development for a really, really long time. Obviously, the DCEU, or the DC Extended Universe, for those who don't know what that is, they have been trying to get a movie about The Flash up and going just for years and years and years now. Obviously, the DCEU in general has just been really struggling lately. They haven't been making a lot of box office success. Unfortunately, even this movie, The Flash, hasn't had a lot of box office success as it's in and of itself. But we do know, everybody kind of knows through the news outlets, that James Gunn from Guardians of the Galaxy is going to try to reboot DC in the form of Superman Legacy in, I think, 2025 or something. So until then, we do have to deal with kind of what Warner Brothers had left over in their slate for films that were made, films that were part of the original plan to get out into theaters until James Gunn's Superman movie eventually comes out. So, in this movie, The Flash, you guys, basically we follow Flash right at the beginning of the movie. There's Justice League is still kind of going strong, but Flash is kind of really getting fed up with kind of doing all the janitorial work for the Justice League. Really, it's kind of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, all those guys really kind of taking the spotlight for the news and really kind of taking out the real bad guys. And Flash is just kind of doing the janitorial stuff, the stuff that really the super speed ability that he has can kind of be put to good use. So he's kind of fed up with it. He's really kind of done with the Justice League. He's not really done, but he's just kind of really sick and tired of all the stuff that the Justice League makes him do whenever they call upon him to, team up with them and stuff like that. So right away, early on in the movie, we find out that Flash, his father has a court date because I think even in the Justice League movie he was in with all these characters really, we find out that Barry Allen's father basically was committed for a crime and he basically has to serve a lot of time in prison for this crime that he supposedly committed. And so there's a court date for basically potentially proving his innocence with something. There's a video that they found with him in a grocery store that might prove that he is innocent of this crime. Things are kind of not going well. Barry reviews the footage that they're going to show at the court date, and he really does not feel good about his dad winning the case based on what he's seeing. It just isn't enough evidence to prove his innocence. So there's kind of this emotional moment that happens, and it causes Barry to almost travel back in time, really, to an earlier time in his life. He knew that he always had super speed, but he didn't know the super speed could be applied to basically to travel back in time to an earlier point in history. And so basically, he finds out that if he erases the fact that, because I think his mother does get killed at an earlier point in his life, if he erases that moment in his life, does his life get better? Does it improve? Um, is there certain aspects of or things in history that he could change that could make society better, make himself better? And so over the course of this movie, he's talking to other characters that he's good friends with, like Bruce Wayne and stuff like that, and they're all advising him, do not do this. It will ruin history. It could ruin the space time continuum. Do not do this. And so Barry does pursue this anyway, and it causes kind of a series of events of the timeline being completely messed up when he goes back into the past and supposedly what he was hoping to fix something in history, and he makes it worse. He also erases metahumans, and he erases all this stuff that was supposed to happen in history. There's alternate versions of characters. There's an alternate version of Superman. There's an alternate version of Batman. There's an alternate version of a lot of things. And so Barry has to fix, this really terrible thing he's done where he had messed up the space-time continuum. All the people he was once friends with and the reality that he knew are now gone. They're replaced with something different. And so Barry has to fix this and has to kind of ask himself some big questions over the course of The Flash. So overall, guys, I enjoyed this movie. There's certainly some things about it that I did not like, which I'll bring up in my negatives. But for the most part, The Flash is a pretty enjoyable summer movie. There's a lot of things to admire about this movie, but there's, like I said, a lot of things about this movie that are really not great. As far as compared to other DC movies, I think I do prefer some other DC films better. I think I do prefer Man of Steel more than this. I think I do prefer that first Wonder Woman movie more than this. And I think I even prefer that James Gunn Suicide Squad reboot more than this, too, while we're talking about it. So not the greatest DC film, certainly not the worst. I certainly prefer this over Black Adam and that first Suicide Squad movie and some other ones that really were not great. But for the most part, The Flash also does have some issues. Let's go over some positives and negatives of things that I really enjoyed about this movie, but some things about it that really are not great either. So for my positives of this movie, there are some tons of old and new DC comic references in this movie. Almost everything you could think of, mostly with film, I would say, like mostly film related DC stuff. So if you have been watching DC movies for most of your life, if you've been watching those Christopher Reeve movies, the Michael Keaton Batman movies, if you've been watching all that stuff all the way back to even before the DCEU was even a thing, you're really going to like this movie. There's just a ton of stuff, specifically if you know a lot about the trivia of a lot of the behind the scenes stuff of a lot of these films that have come out over the years, specifically the DC stuff. I think you're going to have a lot of fun here. There's, like I said, tons of old and new stuff. There's even a lot of stuff to Zack Snyder's Justice League that is referenced a lot. So if you really liked what Zack Snyder was doing with his Justice League content, there's a lot of references to that. So tons of fun references to point out. Specifically, have been watching DC stuff for a long time. So a lot of DC fans, I think, are really going to like that part of this movie. I also like how the film kind of portrays fate, how fate kind of makes us who we are, and how time travel could kind of ruin what fate is supposed to be. So if there's a tragedy that happens in your life, if there's a series of events that cause you to not land a job or to not land a significant other or anything like that, it's really fate's just way of telling you that there's a different destiny that they have in mind for you. And I like how this movie kind of challenges that. Probably one of the more interesting aspects of The Flash is, does fate form us or do we form our own fate? Is there something where a tragedy occurs that kind of makes us who we are? If that tragedy were to not happen, would we not be the people who we are today and things like that? So there's a lot of interesting questions as far as how fate works, how sometimes it works in a way that we do not want it to work out, that we want to keep loved ones around as long as we possibly could. So there's a lot of interesting questions and scenarios that the film throws at us as far as how fate works and how time travel would ruin that if we were to ever discover how time travel could really be possible. So really interesting aspect of the movie, and I really liked how the film plays on how fate forms us for better and for worse sometimes. Michael Keaton, and this really isn't a spoiler because it's in almost all the trailers for this movie. So pretty much anything that's shown in the trailers, I think, is safe to talk about here. Anything that's not shown in the trailers, I'm going to try to avoid talking about. So this is a spoiler-free review, just to let you know. So Michael Keaton does return as Batman. Really, really liked his performance here. I liked all the Michael Keaton versions of Batman, whether it's Batman or Batman Returns from Tim Burton from back in the day. Really enjoy seeing this man play this character. Just a ton of fun watching him play Batman again. A lot of old quotes are brought up from his old Tim Burton Batman movies, and it was just a ton of fun to see Michael Keaton in the role again. He's also in really good shape, too. It's one of those things where, yes, he's much older than he was when he played Batman back in the day, but the man can still fit in that suit. The man can still, it looks like he's probably still working out somewhere, and he really is very good as this character in this movie. So it was great to see Michael Keaton return as Batman. Definitely one of the more enjoyable parts for me in particular, just because I do have so much nostalgia for those Tim Burton Batman movies. And for the most part, whenever Barry Allen has like a family moment that's supposed to be touching or um, really kind of show kind of his more, innocent side, the side of him that really kind of feels bad about who he is and stuff. The part where he has family moments, the parts where he's bonding with his mother or his father or trying to make things right and things like that. Those are really strong moments in the movie, and I really kind of wish the film had more of them just because there is some really strong moments where he's helping his parents, really trying to bond with them the more. Specifically with the mom, I would say Barry Allen's mom. It's definitely a very important piece in this movie. So I liked all the family moments, and I thought they were pretty strong as far as how the script wrote them went. But for my negatives of The Flash, and I think a lot of people are going to say this too, this film has some very bad CGI. There's some certain moments that are fine, like when they re-explore the General Zod stuff from Man of Steel. A lot of that stuff is fine, but like whenever Barry's going back in time, whenever Barry's trying to figure out when to go back in history and when to pick a certain moment in time and stuff like that, or even the stuff he sees as he's traveling back in time, some of that CGI is just unforgivably bad. There's just a lot of scenes where it looks like you're looking at like a PS2 rendering of something. There's even some weird times too where if there's more than one Barry Allen in like the sphere of time, you can tell which is the fake one because it almost looks like a CGI version of Ezra Miller, like in a PS2 rendering form, and it really does not look good. So whatever happened with the CGI, whether it was just they were trying to save money at Warner Brothers or something, or they didn't have enough time to finish the movie, whatever happened with it, the CGI is pretty bad in this movie. So go into this film knowing that it will not be the next Avatar, it will not be the next John Favreau's Jungle Book or anything. The CGI is just not top tier at all. They really needed to work on the CGI in this movie. And for the most part, too, and I know a lot of people probably aren't going to want to hear this, but this was more so just a DC Universe movie than a Flash movie. Yes, Flash is the main central focal point of the story. Yes, it does deal with Flash's perspective on this scenario, but for the most part, there's just a lot of moments where this movie kind of gets taken away from the Flash. I really wanted a film where I really could have got to know the Flash, got to know a day in the life, got to kind of see other stuff, other villains that he has to take on daily. What's his Joker? What is his General Zod? What does the Flash have to usually go up against as a bad guy? And the film doesn't really do that because there's so much time spent on the space time continuum stuff. I really just kind of wish the Flash could have just had his own movie, as the title suggested. And there's just a lot of scenes where it's more so a DC Universe celebration than a Flash movie. And so it's just one of those things where the marketing is a little misleading because you think you're going into a solo Flash movie when it's really kind of a celebration of almost anything and everything DC, which some people are going to be fine with. Obviously, some parts of my positives I brought up that I thought were really fun with those. But this is a Flash movie, and they just didn't deliver on that. Also, for the most part, Barry Allen comes off as kind of annoying in this movie, and unfortunately, both him and other versions of him are kind of the central focal point of the story again. And he's just a really annoying character. At the end of the day, I just don't think I could be invested in a Barry Allen the way I'm invested in like a Bruce Wayne or a Diana Prince or a Clark Kent or whatever. But he's just a very annoying character. Unfortunately, the whole movie is spent with him, and this is a very annoying character. So I really don't know if I can be too invested in this character. It's just the film kind of depicts him in a very annoying way. Specifically, when he meets his alternate version of himself that has a very annoying laugh. That can get really nerving. And also, for the most part, we really don't get a lot of time on Barry's life. Yeah, we kind of get to see his work life. We kind of get to see things that were going on before all the space time continuum stuff happened, things that kind of bothered him about his past. But for the most part, let's just kind of focus on Barry's life some more. It's cool if you want to have Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and all those people show up every once in a while, but I just felt like there was a lot of times where we just weren't spending time on Barry's life very much. And for the most part, I think this film could have just been more story driven. Yeah, it's cool that we have all these DC references and references to other things that we probably like more, like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and stuff. But at the end of the day, that's not really a story. It kind of feels like a series of events that showcases references about anything and everything DC, and I just wanted something a little bit more story driven. So for The Flash, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's a good movie. I think you can watch it once and have a fun time with it. I don't know if it has a lot of rewatch value, though, is the one thing. But like I said, there's just a lot of really bad CGI. I really wanted more of a Flash movie than a DC Universe movie. And Barry Allen's just really annoying in this. And just more time, I think, could have been spent on Barry's life and just have a more story driven script for me personally. So 8 out of 10, enough to recommend it, but enough where I can say be aware of some pretty shaky things that happened in this movie. So 8 out of 10, like the movie, but I did have some issues with it too at the same time. 8 out of 10 for me.